Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
It's not distrust, it's just more of an unknown. I don't know what to expect if I go to that place. In the Gate District, I feel like you're kind of in the center of communities that run the gamut of demographics, and it's a safe place for all sides to kind of come to, and I would say, and to reconcile. But I have to say kudos to YouTube, right? Because I've got my arm in all the way inside of a cow feeling for the calf, and YouTube in my other hand, on my phone, and saying, okay.
That's quite an image there, Steve. That's something.
Sorry.
But so you figured out farming.
I didn't have jobs to offer, so I came up with this idea eventually that we would try to create as many jobs as we could. We roast our own coffee. There's a job there. We have a restaurant, of course, and all the jobs associated with that. Invested in a farm and raising the cattle, all the jobs associated with that.
I'm Sarah Fensky. This is St. Louis on the Air. A new restaurant just opened in the city's Gate District. And if you're someone who doesn't spend a lot of time in the city, that's the lovely historic area between Lafayette Square and Midtown. Maya Angelou was born there, and these days, the neighborhood is seeing lots of attention after years of neglect. Have a Cow Cattle Company, an urban farm store, hopes to be a part of that energy. The restaurant and shop are only the most visible part of a bigger plan designed to help locals find good jobs and also bring a bit of the farm to the table. And joining us today to talk about it is Steve St. Pierre. He is the owner of Have a Cow. Steve, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, Steve, people driving by your restaurant on Lafayette might have noticed that tractor out front. It's certainly eye-catching. What's on offer for someone they're not interested in the backstory, they just want something to eat or drink or buy?
Yeah, so our hope is we are serving up great burgers. So, farm-to-table burgers. We raise the cattle, and so it's fresh beef. Also, we're serving that meat from the farm in frozen form, so you can just come, and if you want a steak for later, buy our frozen meats as well. And then we have a whole selection of other sandwiches. We have vegetarian options and chicken sandwich, and we even have a grilled peanut butter and jelly, which was my favorite growing up, and now we're going to expose that to the world. It's so good.
Well, that sounds like some good options for people who are hungry. A nice casual option there, social distancing in effect. But that's not all to this story. What is the mission that's underpinning this whole effort?
Yeah, so I would say that a few years ago, 2016-ish, I was working in a kind of service environment up in North City. I live in the Etzel-Hodemont neighborhood, and we have a number of ways that we walk with that community and partner with them. And a number of the individuals in the community, young men and women, just asked me, Steve, hey man, we need some of these things that that we're bringing together, but we need jobs. I mean, at a basic level, I have kids, and I need to be able to support my family. And so that just got me thinking. I mean, I was kind of in a ministry environment, and I didn't have jobs to offer. So I came up with this idea eventually that we would try to create as many jobs as we could. And I wrote out the vision that I would talk about here with Have a Cow. And that's what's coming to expression. So we roast our own coffee. There's a job there. We have a restaurant, of course, and all the jobs associated with that. Invested in a farm and raising the cattle, all the jobs associated with that. I have a retail aspect where we're trying to, I say urban farm store, but it's for the urban farmers. So chicken coop supplies, although I don't have that in stock yet.
That's the plan. You're gonna supply the chicken coops.
That's right, and beehives and all the stuff that goes with apiary equipment, and then just wild bird stuff and dog and cat food and anything for the urban farmer. We'll sell jams and jellies and honeys and woohoo,
So just any product
stuff.
sort of tied to the land. I mean, even if your urban farming involves cat farming, you're going to have supplies there for it.
That's right. And so as these young men that, are running in a rough area of the city, and some of them kind of caught up in the clamor of what that means, we're saying, well, would you give me a job? And I said, well, I would. But what I would hire you for is to, with me, learn how to love everybody that comes in the store. And kind of looked at me strangely. And I said, if we can't learn to love even our enemies in this city, we're never going to change. Nothing's going to change in this city. We can have all the kind of laws and in terms of the justice come from our government leaders, but if we actually, those are just on paper. If we don't live that out in practical forms, it's not going to mean a whole lot for us as individuals. So that's the kind of subtitle of our restaurant. It's in the jawbone of the cow on our logo. It says, "Love your enemy." And my hope is that not only my employees and myself learn how to do that, but that my customers also, that there would be an environment of, okay, I'm going to give this person a chance. And that's really where the name came from. So it's not, don't have a cow, man. Don't be crazy about this. It's, we want you to get crazy. And getting crazy for what's right and in that sense, justice, it actually might cost you everything, right? And so we're asking you to love even your enemy. Lay your life down for even your enemy. And I believe it'll go well for you. And I told these young men, listen, when I had a business in the past, I used to steal employees from many fast food places that just, even though they were in this kind of rough environment to be happy, they treated me so well. And I would offer them a job on the spot because they had, in my mind, 80%, 90% of what it takes to be a good employee. They were willing to serve me. So anyway,
and so you're kind of hoping people are going to come in and poach your employees. That's part of the idea here at Have a Cow.
That is, we want them to do it after the lunch rush, but
have a little class.
And that is the ultimate idea. Now it's going to take some time to develop the vision of that. This has been a vision that's been in the motion for 5+ years, and with COVID and everything happening, I actually quit my job to learn the farming, to figure this all out.
And I actually, Steve, I want to slow you down on that because I think your personal story here is pretty interesting. As much as so much of what you're doing now is new to you, as you mentioned, you were running a business before you got involved with Restore St. Louis and working more on the nonprofit end of things. You ran a toy store business. How did you go from that to saying, I guess, use the phrase you used, lay down your life and decide you wanted to devote yourself more to this mission?
Yeah, so my background, I'm from a, wealthier kind of sector of society, I guess, and grew up. I never really had any needs. We were well provided for. And, I lived in that kind of bubble. And it truly was a bubble. I couldn't see much outside of that. And just because you're insulated, right? You live in particular neighborhoods, you just don't see much mess. And during that time, I am a Christian, I guess, and out of that faith, it was really, I felt like I was just making touchdowns and spiking the ball and then pointing to the sky, right? And kind of giving that expression. And I ended up going on a trip, mission trip to Africa. And I was in Africa, and there was this little 6-year-old girl that her story literally undid me. And I crawled back to my little guest house and just kind of said, this doesn't work. What in the world? And that was the moment where I felt like, as I was, doing my Bible study, I heard a different word in that sense from what I was reading that I had never heard before because I didn't have the context to hear it. And that idea was that the expression of what's good and the healing that is needed in this world comes through us as people, right? And then in that way, we use the term often blessing. Well, that blessing is actually not for us. It's for us to live out. And that changed everything. I wrote my wife from Africa because at the time we were thinking about moving to Africa. And I just said, we're going to sell everything. And I think we need to, if you're on board, I think we need to move to some area of St. Louis that there's some suffering going on and that reconciliation is needed. And she was totally on board.
Wow.
Which,
I feel like not all wives would be totally on board for that.
Well, and she's an incredible person. She leads me probably more than I lead her. But
and so you moved into a part of town that didn't have a lot of people with that background you have, saying you came from this wealthier milieu. Did that open your eyes even further, even beyond what you saw in Africa, to see what's right here in St. Louis?
It did. I mean, when we moved in, we had a 6, 9, and 12-year-old children. And on both sides of the coin, my eyes were open. So my old kind of context in my old neighborhood, people thought I was having a cow, right? I was going crazy. And in my new context, the neighborhood wasn't super excited that I was showing up. And, because again, sure, I had a lot of paternalism kind of wrapped up in me. But it didn't take long for that to burn off. My neighbors were really good at it. And I have to say now, my actual neighbor let me know his displeasure with me being his neighbor when I first moved in. But now I would consider him, and I think he would consider me, one of his close friends.
Wow.
And just to see the change, right? And it came after a lot of mess. I mean, I had a gun against my own head, and my door's been kicked in, and my car's been jacked, and my kids have been afraid, and it's a place of a lot of gunfire and mess. I've dragged a kid out of the street in front of my house that had just been shot. Well, if that had happened in my old neighborhood, you'd know about that in Toledo, right?
Yeah.
But nobody knew about it, not even my neighbor. And it just, talk about eye-opening.
That this didn't even make the news, this level of violence that you were seeing in
Right, and
in
we
St.
would
Louis.
consider each other enemies, but we ignore kind of one another. We live past one another. And that's what enemies do, right? We don't live our lives in context to that place over there. And I just think, come on, we need to be more intentional and to work toward reconciling, because we're in this together.
Well, and so, Steve, I mean, for you, you're all in. You didn't just take this big move where you went and moved to North St. Louis and now in a part of town where most people from your background aren't interested in living. You then decided to go all in on this farm business as the underpinning of this new venture. Had you any experience as a farmer before purchasing this farm?
Well, no, but my wife will tell you that's pretty much how I do things, unfortunately.
You jump in.
I jump in, but I always feel like if I don't jump in, I'm not going to get in. It's kind of like when the pool's too cold and you keep dipping your foot, you're never going to get in. But if you jump in, it's too late, you're in.
So you're in. I mean, was there a steep learning curve in figuring out how to get a cow to the place where you're ready to serve that cow at Have a Cow?
Well, absolutely. And but I have to say kudos to YouTube, right? Because I've got my arm in all the way inside of a cow feeling for the calf, and YouTube in my other hand, on my phone, and saying, okay.
That's quite an
yes,
image
that's
there,
a
Steve.
nose.
That's something.
Sorry.
But so you figured
true.
out farming, and now you've got this restaurant. And look, I mean, this is a business that has a notoriously high failure rate. That's even pre-pandemic. What gives you the confidence? I understand you opened last week. What made you feel like, yeah, we're ready to go?
Well, Really? It has a high failure rate? Nobody told me.
I hope you're joking.
Anyway, yeah, the two of them, right? The farm and a restaurant. Those aren't things that banks are going to jump at usually.
Right.
And they haven't yet. But having said that, the confidence comes from just, I feel like people, of course, in our current environment, but have always been ready for something to kind of bring community, right? We want community, and I think we long for it. And so I just feel like if we can foster that in a business, it doesn't matter what it is, a not-for-profit, I don't know.
Yeah.
But if we can foster community, I think people will come and participate.
So, Steve, you're there in the Gate District. What made you decide to locate there rather than closer to the neighborhood that you've been living in and where you've built such connections?
Well, I feel like what we need is bridge communities. And I think the Gate is a perfect bridge community between a lot of different demographics. If I'm living in Edwardsville, I'm not going to come to the neighborhood that I used to live in Edwardsville, but if I'm living there, I have no kind of understanding or context for the neighborhood that I currently live in up in North St. Louis. And I'm not going to come there to eat. And if I live in North St. Louis, I'm not going to go to Edwardsville. There's a mutual kind of distrust between the two. It's not distrust, it's just more of an unknown. I don't know what to expect if I go to that place. In the Gate District, I feel like you're kind of in the center of communities that run the gamut of demographics, and it's a safe place for all sides to kind of come to, and I would say, and to reconcile.
I love the Gate District. I hope people will come and check out this restaurant just because I think this community, it gets under-acknowledged and it has such historic significance, and there's also a lot of great things going on there today. I know you want people to come to this too. And now that you've been open a week, I mean, how's it going? The main plan was to try to get people some jobs. Do you feel like you're on the way to doing that at this point?
I think we're on the way to doing that. We have hired quite a few people, but right now, because of the pandemic and the time it took to construct and all of it, I ran out of money. So right now I'm trying to build the stores back up to get to a point where I can hire folks that we can invest in a little deeper. But we have hired an individual that I would say that we're excited about, and he's embracing us, and it's really been a lot of fun to just say, okay, and to be honest, hey, here's what we're doing, and him responding, well, I want to be a part of that. So that's been fun, but I look forward to down the road, and I don't know how long it'll take to have more of that reconciling of different cultures come and be a part.
Bring everybody to this restaurant and sell them some beef or a hamburger to eat there on site.
That's right. And you asked just how are things going. They are going well. I mean, our first day, we were overwhelmed by the response. We didn't do anything. We didn't even put an easel out on the sidewalk, but the word spread so fast, I'm old. I'm 57, so I'm not used to Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. But wow, stories got posted, and before we knew it, people were in the place.
You know what? I think it's that tractor. I think so many of us were driving by after seeing that tractor. We were waiting for you guys to open, and now have a cow cattle company, an urban farm store. People can come and check it out for themselves. And Steve St. Pierre, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story.
Thanks for inviting me.
If you learned something new from today's episode, consider leaving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the easiest way to help people discover our show. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.